So you're visiting Switzerland
and Italy.
Here's what you need to know about combining both countries into one trip.
But this is not a video about what to do and what to eat, because we have lots of videos on our channel about that. Instead, we're delving into the practical questions that stress out so many travelers, like, should I fly into and out of the same airport or into one country and out of the other? Is it better to fly, train, or drive between the two countries? And if I'm not in a rush, is there a more scenic route I can take instead?
See, we've been helping people travel Switzerland with confidence since 2021. And we realized that more than half of our audience pairs their Swiss vacation with a trip to Italy. And then it became very clear that they needed help navigating how to combine these two countries into one trip.
So you've come to the right place, because that's exactly what we're gonna explain in this video. Before we jump into the meat and potatoes, or should we say raclette and potatoes, or pasta and tomato sauce, it doesn't matter. Before we dive in too deep, let's talk about airports in both countries. If you're coming from overseas, Zurich and Geneva are your main options in Switzerland, while Milan, Rome, and Venice are some of the biggest hubs in Italy. But if you're flying from within Europe, there are quite a few smaller airports, such as Basel in Switzerland, and loads of options throughout Italy that service budget carriers. And if you're really hoping to book a round trip, Milan is a pretty good option because of its convenient central location between both countries. In fact, from the Milan city center, you can reach Lugano in just over an hour, Zurich or Lucerne in just over 3 hours, and Interlaken within 5 hours. And as for Italian destinations, you could find yourself in Florence in just 2 hours, Venice in 2.5 hours, or Rome or Bolzano in just 3 hours and 15 minutes. Though it would take substantially longer to travel between these Italian cities by car. It's also worth mentioning that while airports in Switzerland are pretty close to the city center, the Milan Malpensa airport is 50 kilometers and almost an hour away by train from central Milan. So honestly, we recommend that you look into flying into one airport and out of the other, which will just save you loads of time compared to backtracking just to get back to the same airport. We often use Google Flights to compare these open jaw tickets, like flying into Zurich and out of Rome, and that often costs about the same as a round trip ticket.
The next question you're probably wondering is how to travel between Switzerland and Italy. Should you go by plane, by train, by car? The answer is quite complex, yet also very simple. So let's break it down for you, starting with flying. The biggest point to consider about flying between these two countries is the time it will actually take. Because once you factor in the time to get to the airport early, check in, drop your bags, go through security, find your gate, fly, but then you have to land, pick up your bags, and navigate to the city center or wherever you're going, well, that's a minimum of at least 3 hours plus your actual flight time, and that's a lot of time. In general, we would only consider flying if we need to go from Switzerland to Rome or anywhere south of Rome. Because otherwise, it's often faster to just drive or take the train, but it is worth considering the cost and not just the travel time. By the way, if we haven't met, we're Jana and Brett, Aplins in the Alps, and we help you travel Switzerland with confidence. We've spent years traveling to every canton in Switzerland, and we have lived here full-time since 2023. But we also have dual Italian citizenship and have spent years traveling Italy and even lived there for 6 months back in 2017. So we have a lot of experience traveling between these two countries by plane, car, and train, which is why we're pulling together all of our tips and advice to help you plan your vacation. So if you find this content helpful, please hit the like button so other travelers can find it too. But for now, let's keep going, and next up is driving.
We don't often recommend that travelers rent a car in Switzerland unless you're just visiting really remote places or really enjoy traveling off the beaten path. Public transport is just so accessible, and you'll be able to get everywhere you need to go. Plus, you often have to take public transportation to get up to the mountains anyway, because you literally cannot drive to the top of most mountains. Keep in mind that you need a vignette to drive on Swiss highways. Instead of having toll roads, they use this sticker. It's often included already on rental cars, but if not, it costs 40 francs and you can buy them at most border crossings or at gas stations along the border. And in Italy, you won't need a car if you're just visiting the cities. Plus, driving in places like Rome can be absolutely crazy. For real, we lived there for 6 months a few years ago, and Jana never drove the car because it made her so anxious. Although I would describe it as a pretty fun adventure. However, it's worth having a car if you're visiting places with less public transportation like Tuscany or the Dolomites. And unlike Switzerland, Italy does have tons of toll roads and they can be quite expensive. So in general, you probably won't need a car in Switzerland, but you may want one in Italy. And in that case, don't rent one for the entire trip. Just use public transportation while you're in Switzerland and then rent your car in Italy. And when we say in Italy, that's literally what we mean. Even if you'd rather drive between the two countries, it's often much cheaper to pick up and drop off a rental car in Italy than it is in Switzerland. Oh, and since both of these countries are in the Schengen area, there's no official border crossing by car, plane, or train. Yes, you could technically be asked to show your passport at any time, but in most cases, you'll usually just pass right on through as if you were crossing from one US state to another.
If you're riding trains between Switzerland and Italy, pretty much all of the major routes will go through Milan, and there are two main ways to get to Milan from Switzerland. Through Domodossola, which is the route you take from the western part of Switzerland, such as from Zermatt or Geneva or even Interlaken, or through Lugano, which is where you'd go from the eastern part of Switzerland, such as Zurich or Lucerne, or there is also an option from Interlaken. If you've seen any of our Swiss transportation videos, then you know Brett is a bit of a nerd when it comes to these numbers. So he calculated the time it would take to travel between the main destinations in Switzerland to Italy by car or by train. We won't bore you with all of those numbers, but here's a bit of context. Zurich to Venice takes about 6 hours. Zurich to Florence takes 5.5 to 6.5 hours, and Zurich to Rome is 7 to 9 hours. And if you look back at the graphic we mentioned earlier showing expected travel times from Milan to both Swiss and Italian destinations, you'll get a pretty good feel for how long it might actually take to travel between a wide variety of spots in both countries.
The next question that's possibly already popped up in your head is about how much all this will cost and if a train pass will save you any money. Here's a list of some general prices to travel from Zurich to Italy by train. But of course, they can change at any time and might even cost more or less depending on which season you're traveling in.
But let's talk about train passes because this is where things can get really confusing fast. In most cases, Swiss train passes will work within Switzerland until you reach the border. For example, let's say you're traveling from Zurich to Milan. In this case, your pass would only work until Chiasso. That means you would need to buy a separate ticket from Chiasso to Milan. And technically, you would need a ticket from the last covered train stop on your route, even if that stop comes before the border. However, there are some exceptions where you can use your pass all the way to a destination in Italy. The Swiss Travel Pass fully covers you as far as Aosta by bus from Martigny, to Domodossola from Brig or on the Cento Valley Railway from Locarno, and the train and bus to Tirana, which includes the Bernina Express. It also provides a 50% discount on the train to Murano near Bolzano. And if you're traveling with the half fare card, you will be happy to hear that it provides a 50% discount on all of those routes we just mentioned. So the typical cost of train tickets we showed earlier, if you have the half fare card, would look something more like this. Of course, the Eurail Pass and Interrail Pass work in both of these countries as well, and many of you are probably interested in it. But is it a good buy? Well, generally in Italy, trains are pretty affordable, so we don't recommend the Eurail Pass unless you're just covering some major distances or you just want the convenience of it. And in Switzerland, it doesn't really make a lot of sense either. However, there are a few very unique scenarios where it is the most ideal train pass, and you can learn more about those here in this video.
Okay, now that you have the routes narrowed down, how can you buy tickets for train travel between Switzerland and Italy? There are 3 simple ways. First, you can buy at any train station in Switzerland. This is the best method if you want the reassurance of talking with another human. Or you could purchase on the SBB website, which is the national railway company in Switzerland. Or use the SBB mobile app. In our opinion, this is the easiest way to buy train tickets and navigate from point A to point B. And since we're mentioning the SBB app, you'll want to make sure and download this for your time in Switzerland. It helps you find routes, view timetables, purchase tickets, and navigate along your journey. If you need help, we have a complete tutorial in our ultimate guide to Swiss transportation. And here are a few more helpful tips to consider when you're planning your trip to Switzerland and Italy.
You'll need cell data to use the SBB app, so we highly recommend buying an Olafly eSIM before your trip. They have options for Switzerland, Italy, and all of Europe for any length of time you need. In fact, their Europe plan covers both Switzerland and Italy, and it's the same price as the plans for just one of those countries. It's super easy to install on your phone, and they have unlimited data for your whole vacation, which makes buying train tickets and navigating transportation so much easier.
And don't forget that Switzerland uses the Swiss franc while Italy uses the euro. So you'll need a little cash in both currencies. Expect to use more cash in Italy than you do in Switzerland, and we don't recommend using your euros in Switzerland, even though it's possible in some places.
In Switzerland, when you buy a standard train ticket from point A to point B, you're buying a ticket for that specific route, but not for that specific time. You can theoretically ride along that exact same route at any time of the day, which means you can hop on and hop off as long as you follow the same route. For example, you can buy a train ticket from Zurich to Interlaken via Lucerne and stop in Lucerne for a few hours before continuing to Interlaken. But that same ticket from Zurich to Interlaken via Lucerne does not mean you can divert to Bern. That's a totally different route and would require a different ticket. So always double check the route you're booking, because if you change your mind, the original ticket won't work anymore.
But in Italy, a train ticket locks you into a specific route and a specific time. That means that you cannot hop on or off along the way. Well, you could, but if you do, you'll just have to buy a new ticket each time you board another train. Now, there are of course situations in both countries where things would look a little bit differently, especially on local or commuter trains. But in general, these tips will apply for most city-to-city travel.
Another interesting difference is that Swiss trains generally have open seating, which means you're not given an assigned seat. However, a lot of Italian trains do have assigned seating.
And while most normal trains in Switzerland do not require seat reservations, they are often required, or at least strongly recommended, for many of the Swiss panoramic trains. But since you're assigned a seat when booking a ticket for most Italian trains, no further seat reservation is required.
Last tip here before we move on. Normal train tickets in Switzerland will not sell out, but Swiss Scenic trains or Italian routes may sell out for specific dates and times. So in those cases, it's best to go ahead and buy your train tickets or book your seat reservations as soon as your travel plans are set.
Another question we get asked a lot about train travel between Switzerland and Italy is if there are any scenic train rides you can take. And oh yes, if beauty is more important than speed, there are a few worth mentioning. Some of them are official scenic train rides, but even the unofficial ones are stunning.
First is the Bernina Express, which is a train from St. Moritz or Chur to Tirano and a bus from Tirano to Lugano. Along the way, you'll cross 196 bridges, including a 65-meter-high viaduct. You'll pass through 55 tunnels and chug by 3 lakes, the Bernina Massif and the Motorrauch Glacier.
Next is the Gotthard Panorama Express. You can ride the boat from Lucerne to Flüelen, and then the train from either Flüelen or Ahrtal-Goldau to Lugano. Along the way, a travel guide shows you the sights out the window, like the impressive corkscrew looping tunnels. We personally loved hanging out with our friendly guide and thought the photo coach was a cool way to open the windows for better pictures too.
Alternatively, you can ride the Treno Gottardo. It runs along the same 120-year-old Gotthard panorama route, but goes between Bellinzona or Locarno as far as Lucerne, Zurich, or Basel. It takes about an hour and 15 minutes longer than the fastest route through the Gotthard base tunnel, but you'll actually see the mountains on this train.
Next is the Centovalli Railway between Domodossola and Locarno. This 52-kilometer route goes through nearly untouched valleys, past rugged cliffs, and over 83 bridges in just 2 hours.
Another option is the Lochberg Scenic route between Bern and Domodossola via Spiez, Kandersteg, and Brigg. While this adds about 30 minutes compared to the fastest route, this bypasses the Lochberg-based tunnel, meaning you'll cruise by green Alps and quaint valleys in the idyllic countryside of Switzerland.
These scenic routes look amazing, right? To help you start planning your vacation to Switzerland and Italy, watch this Swiss trip planning guide next, or browse our Italy playlist, and we'll see you in Switzerland. Or Italy. Or maybe even both, because now you know how to make it happen.